Sarah Martinez wiped down the sticky counter for the third time in 10 minutes, her tired eyes scanning the empty diner. The clock on the wall showed 11:47 p.m., and she still had over an hour left on her shift. Her feet ached in her worn sneakers, the same pair she had been wearing for 8 months because she couldn't afford new ones. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the checkered floor that she had mopped countless times. She reached into her apron pocket and felt the crumpled $10 bill, her last bit of money until payday in 3 days. Her stomach growled loudly, reminding her that she had skipped dinner again to save money. The small apartment she shared with her younger brother Tommy was nearly empty of food, and their landlord had already called twice about the overdue rent. Sarah had been working at Murphy's Diner for 2 years, ever since she dropped out of community college to take care of Tommy when their mother disappeared. At 19, she felt much older than her age. Every day was a struggle to keep their heads above water, and some days she wondered if she was drowning slowly without realizing it. The bell above the door chimed, and Sarah looked up to see Mrs. Chun shuffling in. The elderly woman came in every few nights around this time, usually ordering just a cup of coffee and sitting quietly in the corner booth. Sarah had noticed that Mrs. Chun often looked as tired as she felt, with worry lines etched deep around her eyes. "Good evening, Mrs. Chun," Sarah said, forcing a smile. "The usual?" Mrs. Chun nodded and made her way to the corner booth, moving slowly as if every step required great effort. Sarah poured fresh coffee and walked over, setting the cup down gently. As she turned to leave, Mrs. Chin's soft voice stopped her. "You look hungry, dear." Sarah felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. "I'm fine, thank you." Mrs. Chin studied her for a moment with kind but knowing eyes. "When was the last time you ate something proper?" Sarah hesitated. She prided herself on not asking for help, on handling everything on her own, but the genuine concern in the older woman's voice made her defenses crack slightly. "Yesterday morning," she admitted quietly. Mrs. Chun reached into her purse and pulled out a $20 bill, placing it on the table. "Order yourself something from the kitchen." "I can't take your money," Sarah protested, even though her stomach cramped with hunger. "It's not charity," Mrs. Chun said firmly. "It's payment for all the times you've been kind to me, all the times you've refilled my coffee without me asking, all the times you've smiled even when you were clearly having a difficult day." Sarah stared at the money, fighting back tears. She had been strong for so long, carrying the weight of responsibility for herself and Tommy, that this small act of kindness felt overwhelming. "What would you like me to order for you?" Mrs. Chun asked gently. "I shouldn't," Sarah whispered. "Child, sometimes accepting help is the bravest thing you can do." Sarah finally nodded and walked back to the kitchen, where Pete, the night cook, was cleaning his grill. She asked him to make 2 orders of his famous chicken and dumplings, one for Mrs. Chun and one for herself. When she returned with the food, Mrs. Chun smiled warmly. They ate together in comfortable silence, and Sarah felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. The warm food filled her empty stomach, but more than that, the kindness filled something in her heart that had been empty for a long time. "Tell me about yourself," Mrs. Chun said as they finished eating. Sarah found herself sharing more than she had intended. She talked about Tommy, how he was 15 and smart but struggling in school because he was angry about their situation. She mentioned her dreams of becoming a nurse, dreams she had put on hold indefinitely. She spoke about the constant worry about money, about feeling like she was failing at taking care of her family. Mrs. Chun listened without judgment, occasionally nodding or asking gentle questions. When Sarah finished, the older woman leaned back in her seat. "You remind me of myself when I was young," Mrs. Chun said. "I came to this country with nothing but hope and determination. I worked in restaurants, cleaned offices, did whatever I could to survive. People told me I would never amount to anything." "What happened?" Sarah asked. "I proved them wrong," Mrs. Chun said with a small smile. "But it took time, and it took help from others, even when I didn't want to accept it." The bell chimed again, and a young man in an expensive suit walked in. He looked completely out of place in the humble diner, checking his phone and glancing around with obvious discomfort. Sarah stood up to serve him, but he held up a hand. "I'm actually looking for someone," he said. "Mrs. Chun." Mrs. Chin's expression became guarded. Who's asking? My name is Marcus Thompson. I'm an assistant to Mr. Robert Kingston. He's been trying to reach you. Sarah noticed Mrs. Chin's posture change, becoming more formal, almost regal. It was a transformation that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her. Mr. Kingston knows how to reach me if it's truly important, Mrs. Chun replied coolly. Marcus looked uncomfortable. He said to tell you it's about the foundation project. The deadline is approaching, and there are decisions that need your approval. Mrs. Chin glanced at Sarah, who was trying to process this strange conversation. The tired elderly woman who had been sharing dinner with her suddenly seemed like someone entirely different. Tell Mr. Kingston I'll be in touch tomorrow, Mrs. Chin said finally. Marcus nodded and left quickly, the bell chiming behind him. Sarah stared at Mrs. Chun, confusion clear on her face. There are things about my life that I don't share casually, Mrs. Chun explained gently. But meeting you tonight, seeing your kindness and determination, has reminded me why certain work is important. She stood up slowly and gathered her things. Sarah, I want you to do something for me. Tomorrow afternoon, I want you to go to the Kingston Foundation offices downtown. Ask for Marcus Thompson and tell him Mrs. Chin sent you. I don't understand, Sarah said. You will, Mrs. Chin replied. Trust me. She left money for the meal and a generous tip, then walked toward the door. Before leaving, she turned back. Sometimes the universe puts people in our path for a reason. Tonight, I think we helped each other remember something important. After Mrs. Chin left, Sarah finished her shift in a daze. She kept thinking about the strange encounter, the way Mrs. Chun had transformed before her eyes, and the mysterious message about the Kingston Foundation. She had heard the name before. Robert Kingston was one of the wealthiest men in the city, known for his business empire and philanthropic work. When her shift ended at 1 a.m., Sarah walked the 6 blocks home to save bus fare. The streets were mostly empty, and she used the quiet time to think. Tommy was asleep when she got home, and she found a note from him saying he had eaten the last of the cereal for dinner. She felt a familiar pang of guilt about not providing better for him. She sat at their small kitchen table and counted her money again. After paying for her portion of dinner with Mrs. Chun, she had $12 left. Rent was due in 2 days, and she was still $300 short. The electric company had sent a final notice, and Tommy needed new school supplies. But, despite all the worries, she felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. Mrs. Chin's kindness had reminded her that there were still good people in the world, people who cared about others without expecting anything in return. She thought about the mysterious invitation to visit the Kingston Foundation. Part of her wondered if she had misunderstood, if Mrs. Chin was just being polite. But another part of her, the part that had always believed in possibilities even when life seemed impossible, urged her to go. Before going to bed, Sarah looked in on Tommy. Her younger brother was tall for his age, all arms and legs, growing faster than she could keep up with buying clothes. His dark hair fell across his forehead as he slept, and she could see traces of the little boy he used to be before life became so complicated. She made a silent promise to him, and to herself. Tomorrow, she would go to the Kingston Foundation. She would see what Mrs. Chin had meant. And maybe, just maybe, something would change for the better. The next morning, Sarah woke up early despite having only a few hours of sleep. She had dreams filled with warm dumplings and mysterious conversations, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something important was about to happen. She got ready for her day's shift at the diner, choosing her cleanest uniform and making sure her name tag was polished. As she prepared to leave, Tommy emerged from his room, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Sarah, he called out. Are we going to be okay? The question hit her like a punch to the chest. Tommy rarely asked directly about their situation, preferring to pretend everything was normal. The fact that he was asking meant he was more worried than he usually let on. We're going to be fine, she told him, trying to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. I'm working on some things. What kind of things? He pressed. Sarah hesitated. She didn't want to raise his hopes based on a conversation she still didn't fully understand. But she also didn't want to lie to him. There might be an opportunity, she said carefully. I can't say more yet, but I want you to know that I'm doing everything I can to make things better for us. Tommy nodded, seeming satisfied with that answer. I know you are. You always do. As Sarah walked to work, She thought about her conversation with Mrs. Chun and the strange visit from Marcus Thompson. She had looked up the Kingston Foundation online using the computer at the library, and what she found had surprised her. The foundation was involved in education initiatives, small business development, and programs to help working families. She spent her morning shift serving breakfast to the usual crowd of construction workers and early commuters, but her mind kept drifting to the afternoon. She had asked her manager, Frank, if she could leave 2 hours early, claiming she had a doctor's appointment. He hadn't been happy about it, but Sarah rarely asked for time off, so he agreed. As the lunch rush wound down, Sarah's nervous excitement grew. She changed out of her uniform in the diner's small bathroom, putting on her best dress, a simple navy blue one she had bought at a thrift store for job interviews. It was clean and professional, even if it was slightly too big for her. She took the bus downtown, spending $2 precious on fare, but knowing she couldn't afford to be sweaty and tired from walking. The Kingston Foundation occupied 3 floors of a gleaming office building in the financial district, a world away from the rundown neighborhood where she lived and worked. The lobby was intimidating, all marble floors and modern art. Sarah approached the receptionist's desk, her heart pounding. "I'm here to see Marcus Thompson," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Mrs. Chen sent me." The receptionist, a woman with perfectly styled hair and an expensive-looking suit, looked Sarah up and down with barely concealed disdain. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked coldly. "No, but Mrs. Chun said to ask for Marcus and mention her name." The receptionist's expression changed slightly at the mention of Mrs. Chun, becoming more cautious than dismissive. She picked up the phone and had a brief, hushed conversation. "Take the elevator to the 15th floor," she said finally. "Someone will meet you there." As the elevator climbed, Sarah's stomach churned with anxiety. She had no idea what to expect, what Mrs. Chun might have arranged, or whether this was all some kind of misunderstanding. But she had come this far, and she wasn't going to turn back now. The elevator doors opened to reveal Marcus Thompson waiting for her, looking much more relaxed than he had in the diner the night before. "Miss Martinez," he said with a smile. "Mrs. Chun said you might be coming by. Please, follow me." He led her down a hallway lined with awards and photos showing the foundation's work around the world. Sarah tried to take it all in while keeping up with Marcus's brisk pace. They stopped at a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked. Sarah stared at Mrs. Chun in disbelief, trying to reconcile the elegant businesswoman sitting before her with the tired elderly customer she had served countless times at the diner. The transformation was so complete that Sarah wondered if she was dreaming. "I don't understand," Sarah said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Chun smiled gently, and in that expression, Sarah caught a glimpse of the woman she had shared dinner with the night before. "My full name is Margaret Chin Kingston," she explained. "I'm Robert Kingston's business partner and, as of 6 months ago, his wife." Sarah's eyes widened. She had heard of Robert Kingston, of course. Everyone in the city knew about the billionaire philanthropist who had built a business empire from nothing and now dedicated his wealth to helping others. But she had never connected him to the quiet woman who came to the diner for late-night coffee. "But why?" Sarah began, then stopped, unsure how to phrase her question without sounding rude. "Why was I spending my evenings in a rundown diner instead of living in a mansion?" Mrs. Chin finished with an understanding smile. "That's a fair question, and the answer is more complicated than you might think." Marcus quietly poured water for both women and then took a seat at the far end of the table, pulling out a tablet to take notes. "I wasn't always wealthy, Sarah," Mrs. Chin continued. "I immigrated to this country 45 years ago with nothing but the clothes on my back and a fierce determination to build a better life. I worked in restaurants, cleaned offices, took any job I could find. I saved every penny I could, and slowly, very slowly, I began to invest in small businesses." She paused, looking out the window at the city below. "Over the years, those small investments grew. I developed a talent for recognizing potential in people and businesses that others overlooked. Eventually, I built my own investment firm, specializing in helping immigrants and working-class entrepreneurs get the capital they needed to succeed." Sarah listened intently, trying to process this revelation about someone she thought she knew. 5 years ago, I met Robert at a conference about economic development. We discovered we shared similar philosophies about using wealth responsibly and helping others achieve their potential. We became business partners first, then close friends, and eventually something more. Mrs. Chen reached across the table and took Sarah's hand gently. But success and wealth can be isolating, Sarah. It becomes difficult to know who genuinely cares about you as a person versus who wants something from you. I began going to Murphy's Diner 6 months ago because I needed a place where I could just be myself, where nobody knew who I was or what I had. You were studying people, Sarah realized suddenly, watching how they treated you when they thought you were just another customer. Partly, yes, Mrs. Chin admitted. But mostly I was trying to remember who I used to be, to stay connected to the person I was before money changed everything. And in watching you, Sarah, I saw something I had been looking for. What do you mean? Mrs. Chun leaned back in her chair, her expression becoming more serious. Robert and I have been developing a new initiative for the foundation. We want to create a program that identifies individuals with exceptional character and potential. People who are currently struggling not due to lack of ability or determination, but simply due to circumstances beyond their control. Sarah felt her heart start to race. She had a feeling she knew where this conversation was heading, but she didn't dare hope. The program would provide comprehensive support, education funding, living expenses, mentorship, and business development opportunities. But we've struggled to figure out how to identify the right candidates. How do you measure character? How do you recognize potential that hasn't had the chance to flourish? Mrs. Chin smiled. Then, I started watching you work, Sarah. Night after night, I saw you treat every customer with kindness, even when you were clearly exhausted. I saw you go without food to make sure others were served. I watched you handle difficult customers with grace and patience. Most importantly, I saw you care for your brother with a maturity and selflessness far beyond your years. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back, still not quite believing this was real. Last night, when you were struggling with whether to accept my offer to buy you dinner, I saw something else: pride, dignity, and the same fierce independence that I once had. You reminded me why this program is so important. Marcus looked up from his tablet. Mrs. Kingston, should I brief Miss Martinez on the program details? Mrs. Chin nodded. Please. Marcus cleared his throat and began reading from his notes. The Kingston Chin Opportunity Initiative is designed to support individuals between the ages of 18 and 25 who demonstrate exceptional character, work ethic, and potential for positive community impact. Selected participants receive full educational funding for college or vocational training, a monthly living allowance, healthcare coverage, and access to mentorship and networking opportunities. Sarah's mouth fell open. That sounds like something from a movie. I understand your skepticism, Mrs. Chin said. When I was your age, I would have thought the same thing. But, Sarah, this is real. Robert and I have allocated $50 million for the program's first 5 years. We plan to support approximately 100 individuals during that time. Why me? Sarah asked, her voice shaking. I'm just a waitress. I dropped out of college. I don't have any special skills or talents. Mrs. Chun leaned forward intently. Sarah, you're raising your teenage brother while working full-time and still finding ways to be kind to strangers. You've maintained your integrity and compassion despite facing incredible hardships. Those aren't small things, they're extraordinary things. She paused, letting her words sink in. But I want to be completely transparent with you. This isn't charity. If you accept, you'll be expected to work hard, maintain excellent academic performance if you choose to return to school, and eventually pay it forward by helping others in similar situations. What would I have to do? Sarah asked quietly. Marcus consulted his tablet again. First, you would need to decide on your educational path. Mrs. Kingston mentioned that you were interested in nursing? Sarah nodded. I want to be a registered nurse. I've always been good at taking care of people, and I know there's a real need for healthcare workers. Perfect, Mrs. Chin said. We have partnerships with several nursing programs in the area. You could start with prerequisites at the community college level and then transfer to a 4-year program. The foundation would cover all tuition, books, and educational expenses. What about Tommy? Sarah asked immediately. I can't leave him alone. We've thought about that, Mrs. Chen replied. The living allowance would be sufficient for you to rent a modest apartment where Tommy could continue living with you. Additionally, the foundation has an after-school tutoring program that could help Tommy with his studies and provide him with positive mentorship. Sarah felt dizzy with the possibilities suddenly opening before her. This can't be real, she whispered. Mrs. Chen reached into her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. These are the preliminary program documents. I want you to take them home, read through everything carefully, and discuss it with Tommy. This is a big decision, and I don't want you to feel pressured. How long do I have to decide? Take a week, Mrs. Chen said. But, Sarah, I want you to understand something. Last night, when you used your last $10 to share a meal with me, you showed me the kind of person this program was designed to help. You have something that can't be taught, a generous heart, and an unshakable moral compass. Sarah carefully took the folder, holding it as if it might disappear if she handled it too roughly. There's one more thing, Mrs. Chen added. Part of the program involves participants meeting regularly with Robert and me. We want to get to know everyone personally and provide individual guidance. Are you comfortable with that? I think so, Sarah said, still processing everything. But I have to ask, why keep going to the diner? Now that you know you want to help me, why not just do this through official channels? Mrs. Chen's expression became slightly sad. Because, Sarah, the diner is where I feel most like myself. Those late-night conversations, the simple human connections, that's what keeps me grounded. Wealth can be wonderful, but it can also be a barrier between you and genuine relationships. She stood up and walked to the window. I hope that even if you accept this opportunity, you'll still let an old woman buy you dinner occasionally at Murphy's. Sarah laughed, the first genuine laugh she'd had in months. Mrs. Chen, I think you're going to find that I'm a very loyal friend. Marcus stood up and handed Sarah his business card. My direct number is on there. When you're ready to talk, just call. We can arrange to meet wherever you're most comfortable. As they prepared to leave the conference room, Mrs. Chen turned to Sarah one more time. I want you to promise me something. What? Promise me that you'll really consider this opportunity. Don't let fear or pride make the decision for you. Think about what you could accomplish, how you could help others, what kind of future you could build for yourself and Tommy. Sarah nodded solemnly. I promise. The elevator ride down seemed to take forever, and Sarah found herself staring at her reflection in the polished doors. She looked the same as she had that morning, but she felt completely different. Hope was a dangerous thing when you'd been disappointed so many times, but she couldn't help the excitement building in her chest. On the bus ride home, Sarah clutched the folder tightly and tried to imagine what Tommy would say. He had always been proud of her sacrifices, but also guilty about them. This opportunity could change everything for both of them. When she got home, Tommy was at the kitchen table doing homework. He looked up as she entered, immediately noticing her dressy clothes and the official-looking folder in her hands. How did the doctor's appointment go? He asked suspiciously. Tommy had always been too smart for his own good. Sarah sat down across from him and took a deep breath. I wasn't at the doctor's office, Tommy. I was at a meeting about a possible opportunity for us. She spent the next hour explaining everything that had happened, from her conversations with Mrs. Chun to the meeting at the foundation offices. Tommy listened with growing amazement and skepticism. This sounds too good to be true, he said finally. Are you sure this isn't some kind of scam? Sarah had wondered the same thing. I looked up the Kingston Foundation online. It's completely legitimate. Robert Kingston is one of the most respected philanthropists in the country. But why would they want to help us? Tommy asked. We're nobody special. Sarah reached across the table and took his hand. Tommy, you are special. We both are. We've survived things that would have broken other families. We've stayed together, we've stayed honest, and we've never stopped caring about other people even when we barely had anything for ourselves. Tommy was quiet for a long moment, processing everything she had told him. What happens if you say yes? I go back to school to become a nurse. You get extra help with your studies and maybe some mentoring. We move to a better apartment. We stop worrying about money for basic things like food and rent. And if you say no? Sarah looked around their tiny, run-down apartment. Things stay the same. We keep struggling. We keep hoping that something will change, but not doing anything to make it happen. Tommy nodded slowly. Then, I think you should say yes. Are you sure? It would mean big changes for both of us. Sarah, Tommy said seriously, you've given up everything for me. You dropped out of school, you work a job you hate, you never buy anything for yourself. Maybe it's time to let someone help you for once. That evening, Sarah spread the foundation documents across their small kitchen table and read through every page carefully. The program was even more comprehensive than Mrs. Chun had described. In addition to educational and living expenses, participants received professional mentoring, internship opportunities, and support for starting their own businesses after graduation. There were requirements, of course. Participants needed to maintain a minimum GPA, complete community service hours, and attend regular program meetings and workshops. They were expected to serve as mentors for future program participants after completing their education. But, most importantly, Sarah realized as she read through the program philosophy, the foundation wasn't just investing money in people. They were investing in the idea that everyone deserved a chance to reach their potential, regardless of their circumstances. The next morning, Sarah went to work with a new energy she hadn't felt in years. Frank noticed the change immediately. You seem different today, he commented as Sarah prepared for the breakfast rush. Good news about that doctor's appointment? Sarah smiled. You could say that. She worked her shift with unusual enthusiasm, seeing each interaction with customers as practice for the professional world she might soon be entering. When Mrs. Chen came in for her usual coffee that evening, Sarah felt nervous for the first time since meeting her. How are you feeling about everything? Mrs. Chen asked as Sarah served her coffee. Overwhelmed, Sarah admitted. But, in a good way, I think. Have you made a decision? Sarah took a deep breath. I want to say yes, Mrs. Chen. But I'm scared. What if I fail? What if I'm not smart enough or good enough? What if I let you and Mr. Kingston down? Mrs. Chun smiled warmly. Sarah, do you know what the biggest predictor of success is? It's not intelligence or talent or even opportunity. It's the willingness to keep trying when things get difficult. You've already proven you have that quality. She paused, sipping her coffee thoughtfully. But I want to tell you something else. When I was 25, a businessman named Frank Morrison took a chance on me. He lent me the money to buy my first property, a small apartment building that nobody else wanted because it was in a rough neighborhood. What happened? 3 weeks later, Sarah stood in the doorway of their new apartment, still hardly believing it was real. The two-bedroom place was in a safe neighborhood with good schools, complete with a modern kitchen, working appliances, and windows that actually let in natural light. After years of living in a cramped studio with broken heating and unreliable plumbing, this felt like a palace. Tommy was in his new room, unpacking the boxes of books and clothes that Marcus had helped them move. The Kingston Foundation had arranged everything, from finding the apartment to handling the lease paperwork to providing basic furniture. Sarah had insisted on keeping some of their old belongings, the items that held memories of better times with their mother. Sarah, come look at this. Tommy called from his room. She found him standing at his bedroom window, which overlooked a small park where kids were playing basketball. In their old neighborhood, the nearest park had been blocks away and filled with broken glass and drug dealers. Here, children played safely while their parents watched from benches. I can walk to school from here, Tommy said, grinning. And there's a library across the street. Sarah felt a familiar tightness in her throat. She had been emotional a lot lately, overwhelmed by how quickly their lives had changed. Do you like it? Are you kidding? Sarah, this is the nicest place we've ever lived. That evening, as they ate dinner at their new table, their first real dining table, Sarah thought about the meeting she had the next day with her academic advisor at the community college. The foundation had enrolled her in an accelerated program that would allow her to complete her nursing prerequisites in 18 months instead of the usual 2 years. Are you nervous about starting classes? Tommy asked, as if reading her thoughts. Terrified, Sarah admitted. It's been 2 years since I was in school. What if I can't keep up? What if I've forgotten how to study? Tommy reached across the table and patted her hand, an oddly mature gesture for a 15-year-old. Sarah, you're the smartest person I know. You've been managing our entire lives since you were 17. College is going to be easy compared to that. The next morning, Sarah took the bus to Riverside Community College. As she walked across the campus, she felt like an imposter among the younger students. Most of them looked confident and carefree in a way she had never experienced. She wondered if her years of working and struggling had aged her beyond her 19 years. Dr. Patricia Williams, her academic advisor, was a warm woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She reviewed Sarah's high school transcripts and placement test scores with an encouraging smile. "These are excellent scores, Sarah," Dr. Williams said, "particularly in math and science. Have you always been strong in those areas?" "I think so," Sarah replied uncertainly. "I was good in school before I had to leave." "Well, your abilities are definitely intact. The foundation has enrolled you in a very comprehensive program: anatomy and physiology, chemistry, psychology, statistics, and English composition. It's a heavy course load, but your test scores suggest you can handle it." Dr. Williams handed Sarah her class schedule and a campus map. "I want you to know that the foundation has also arranged for you to have a tutor if you need one. And there's a study group specifically for students in accelerated nursing programs." As Sarah left the meeting, she felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. She had dreamed of being in college for so long that actually being here felt surreal. Her first class was Introduction to Chemistry, and Sarah arrived 15 minutes early, wanting to choose a good seat and get oriented. The classroom was larger than any she remembered from high school, with stadium-style seating and modern equipment she didn't recognize. Other students filtered in, most of them chatting easily with friends or checking their phones. Sarah felt self-conscious about being older and obviously less comfortable than everyone else. When the professor walked in, an energetic woman who looked to be in her 30s, Sarah straightened up and pulled out a notebook. "Good morning, everyone," Professor Martinez said as she began setting up her laptop. "Welcome to Chemistry 101. I know some of you are here because you have to be, and others because you want to be. My job is to make sure that by the end of this semester, you all understand how chemistry affects every aspect of your daily lives." The lecture covered basic atomic structure and chemical bonds. Sarah found herself taking detailed notes, her hand cramping from writing so quickly. She had forgotten how much she enjoyed learning when the material was challenging but comprehensible. After class, a girl about Sarah's age approached her. She was petite with bright purple hair and multiple piercings, looking like everything Sarah imagined a college student should look like. "Hey, I'm Jess," the girl said with a friendly smile. "I noticed you taking really detailed notes. Are you pre-nursing too?" "Yes," Sarah replied, still feeling slightly awkward. "I'm Sarah." "Cool. Want to grab coffee and compare schedules? I have a feeling we're going to be in a lot of the same classes." Sarah almost declined automatically. Coffee cost money, and she still wasn't used to having disposable income for small pleasures. But she caught herself and nodded. That would be great. They went to the campus coffee shop, where Jess ordered an elaborate drink with multiple flavor shots, while Sarah stuck with regular coffee. As they compared schedules, Sarah was surprised to discover that Jess was also 21 and returning to school after working for several years. "I was a hairdresser," Jess explained. "Good money, but I always wanted to do something in healthcare. Finally, decided to stop making excuses and go for it." "What made you choose nursing?" Sarah asked. "My mom was in the hospital for cancer treatment a few years ago," Jess said, her expression becoming more serious. "The nurses were incredible. They weren't just providing medical care, they were emotional support for our whole family. I realized that's what I wanted to do with my life." Sarah felt a sudden connection with this purple-haired stranger. "That's exactly why I want to be a nurse. Taking care of people feels like the most important thing I could do." They spent an hour talking about their goals, their fears about school, and their backgrounds. Sarah was careful not to mention the foundation or the specific circumstances that had brought her to college, but she found herself opening up about Tommy and her determination to create a better future for both of them. "You want to study together?" Jess asked as they prepared to leave. "I learn better with other people, and you seem really focused." "I'd like that," Sarah said, meaning it. That evening, Sarah called Mrs. Chun to update her on the first day of classes. They had arranged to check in weekly, not as a requirement, but because Mrs. Chun was genuinely interested in Sarah's progress. "How did it feel to be back in a classroom?" Mrs. Chun asked. "Overwhelming, but exciting," Sarah replied honestly. "I forgot how much I missed learning." "That's wonderful to hear. And how is Tommy adjusting?" Sarah looked toward Tommy's room. where she could hear him on a video call with classmates working on a group project. He's doing great. Better than great, actually. He's making friends, his grades are improving, and he seems happier than I've seen him in years. I'm so glad. Sarah, I want to ask you something, and please be honest with me. Are you taking care of yourself? Are you getting enough sleep, eating properly, managing your stress? The question surprised Sarah. She had been so focused on academic success and making sure Tommy was settled that she hadn't thought much about her own well-being. I think so, she said uncertainly. Sarah, this program is designed to support your whole life, not just your education. If you burn yourself out trying to be perfect, you won't succeed in the long run. Please remember that it's okay to ask for help, to take breaks, to be human. After the phone call, Sarah realized that Mrs. Chun was right. She had been approaching college with the same survival mentality that had gotten her through the past 2 years, working constantly, sleeping little, and pushing herself beyond reasonable limits. The next morning, she made a conscious effort to pace herself. She attended her anatomy class, where she met another nursing student named David who offered to be part of a study group. She had lunch instead of skipping it to review notes. She even spent an hour at the campus recreation center, walking on a treadmill while listening to a chemistry podcast. These small changes made a bigger difference than she had expected. By the end of her second week of classes, Sarah felt more balanced and confident. Her professors had praised her work, she was forming genuine friendships with classmates, and Tommy was thriving in his new environment. But the most significant change came during her third week, when she had her first meeting with Robert Kingston himself. Marcus had arranged the meeting at a small cafe near the foundation offices, explaining that Mr. Kingston preferred informal settings for getting to know program participants. Sarah arrived 15 minutes early, wearing her best dress and feeling nervous despite weeks of preparation. Robert Kingston was not what she had expected. The billionaire philanthropist was tall and lean, probably in his early 60s, with graying hair and laugh lines around his eyes. He wore jeans and a button-down shirt, looking more like a college professor than a business mogul. Sarah, he said warmly, standing to shake her hand. Margaret has told me so much about you. Please, sit down. Can I order you something to eat? Just coffee. Thank you, Sarah replied, still feeling formal despite his casual manner. Margaret mentioned that you're studying to become a nurse, Robert said after they had ordered. What draws you to healthcare? Sarah had prepared for this question, but when she began to answer, she found herself speaking from the heart rather than from her rehearsed response. I think it comes from taking care of my brother, she said. When our mother left, I had to learn how to handle everything, his physical needs, his emotional needs, his education. I realized I was good at it, and I liked knowing that my actions could make someone's life better. Robert nodded thoughtfully. That's a beautiful motivation. But nursing is also incredibly demanding. Long hours, emotional stress, physical exhaustion. Are you prepared for those challenges? Mr. Kingston, I've been working night shifts at a diner for 2 years while raising a teenager. I think I understand something about demanding work. Robert laughed, a genuine sound that immediately put Sarah more at ease. That's an excellent point. Margaret also mentioned that you used your last $10 to share a meal with her. Tell me about that decision. Sarah felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment. It wasn't really a decision. She looked tired and kind, and I wanted her to know that someone cared about her well-being. Even when you were struggling yourself? Especially then, Sarah said quietly. When you're having a hard time, you remember how much small kindnesses mean. Robert was quiet for a moment, studying her with an intensity that made Sarah slightly uncomfortable. Then he smiled. Sarah, I've been wealthy for most of my adult life, but I grew up poor. My father worked 3 jobs to support our family, and my mother cleaned houses to make ends meet. I remember what it's like to worry about basic necessities. He paused to sip his coffee. What I've learned is that wealth doesn't automatically make people generous, but struggle often does. People who have experienced hardship tend to be more compassionate, more aware of others' needs. Is that why you started the foundation? Sarah asked. Partly, but mostly it's because I believe that talent and character are equally distributed across all social classes, but opportunity is not. There are countless brilliant, hardworking people who never get the chance to develop their potential simply because of circumstances beyond their control. Robert leaned forward slightly. Sarah, I want you to understand something important about this program. We're not doing this because we feel sorry for you or because we want to fix your problems. We're doing this because we recognize your potential and want to invest in it. What do you expect from me? Sarah asked directly. Excellence, but not perfection. Hard work, but not at the expense of your health. Growth, both academic and personal. And, eventually, when you're established in your career, we hope you'll find ways to help others the way we're helping you now. They spent another hour talking about Sarah's goals, her challenges, and her plans for the future. Robert asked thoughtful questions about Tommy's adjustment, her academic progress, and her long-term vision for her nursing career. As the meeting wound down, Robert handed Sarah a small wrapped package. This is from Margaret and me, he said. A small congratulations gift for taking this leap of faith. Inside the package was a beautiful stethoscope with Sarah's initials engraved on the chest piece. The accompanying card read, "For Sarah Martinez, RN, we can't wait to see where your compassion and determination take you." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Mr. Kingston, I don't know how to thank you, and Mrs. Chun for this opportunity. Thank us by succeeding," Robert said simply. "Thank us by becoming the nurse you're meant to be. Thank us by remembering this feeling when you have the chance to help someone else achieve their dreams." That evening, Sarah called Jess to share her excitement about the meeting and the gift. They had become close friends over the past few weeks, studying together almost every evening and supporting each other through the challenges of their demanding course load. "That's so cool," Jess said when Sarah described the engraved stethoscope. "I can't wait until we get to actually use those in our clinical rotations." "Jess," Sarah said suddenly, "can I ask you something? Do you ever feel like you don't deserve good things that happen to you?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "All the time," Jess said finally. "Like, I know I work hard and everything, but sometimes I look around at my life and think, how did I get so lucky?" "That's exactly how I feel," Sarah admitted. "Everything is going so well that I keep waiting for something to go wrong." "You know what my mom told me when I was having those feelings?" Jess asked. "She said that the people who worry about whether they deserve good things are usually the ones who deserve them most, because they don't take them for granted." After they hung up, Sarah thought about Jess's mother's words. 8 months into her nursing program, Sarah stood in the pediatric ward of City General Hospital, wearing scrubs for the first time. Her clinical rotation was beginning, and she felt a mixture of excitement and terror that reminded her of her first day of college. The difference was that now she felt more prepared, more confident in her abilities. "Sarah Martinez?" A tall woman in navy scrubs approached her with a warm smile. "I'm Linda Rodriguez, your supervising nurse for this rotation. Ready to put all that textbook knowledge to work?" Sarah nodded, trying to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. "I'm ready." The pediatric ward was both beautiful and heartbreaking. The walls were painted with bright murals of animals and fairy tale characters, but behind the cheerful decorations were children dealing with serious illnesses. Sarah's first assignment was to help with routine vitals and medication administration under Linda's supervision. Their first patient was a 7-year-old boy named Marcus who was recovering from surgery to repair a congenital heart defect. When Sarah walked into his room, he was sitting up in bed playing with a tablet, his dark hair sticking up at odd angles, and a shy smile on his face. "Hi, Marcus," Sarah said gently, approaching his bed. "I'm Sarah, and I'm going to be helping take care of you today." Marcus looked at her seriously. "Are you a real nurse?" "I'm learning to be a real nurse," Sarah replied honestly. "But Linda here is definitely a real nurse, and she's teaching me how to do everything right." "Good," Marcus said with the matter-of-fact tone children often use. "Because my heart is very important." As Sarah checked Marcus's temperature and listened to his heart with her engraved stethoscope, she was struck by his bravery. Here was a child who had undergone major surgery and would need ongoing medical care for the rest of his life, yet he was focused on helping her learn to do her job properly. "Your heart sounds very strong," Sarah told him after finishing her assessment. "The doctors did excellent work." "I know," Marcus said proudly. "My mom says I'm going to be able to play soccer when I'm older." Throughout the morning, Sarah worked with several pediatric patients, each one teaching her something different about resilience, hope, and the importance of compassionate care. She was surprised by how natural it felt to connect with the children and their families to provide comfort alongside medical treatment. During her lunch break, Linda sat down with Sarah in the hospital cafeteria to discuss her performance. "You have excellent instincts," Linda said. "You're gentle but confident with the children, and you listen well to both the patients and their families. Those are skills that can't really be taught. You either have them or you don't." "Thank you," Sarah said, feeling proud but also curious. "Can I ask you something? How do you handle the emotional side of this work? Seeing children who are seriously ill?" Linda considered the question thoughtfully. "It's difficult, and anyone who tells you it gets easier is lying. But what I've learned is that the privilege of being part of someone's healing process, of providing comfort during their most vulnerable moments, outweighs the emotional challenges." She paused to take a bite of her sandwich. "Also, children are remarkable teachers. They show us how to find joy even in difficult circumstances, how to be present in the moment instead of worrying about the future." That evening, Sarah called Mrs. Chun for their weekly check-in, eager to share her excitement about the clinical experience. "I loved it," Sarah said without preamble when Mrs. Chun answered the phone. "I mean, it was challenging and sometimes sad, but I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be." "That's wonderful, Sarah. Tell me more about what you loved specifically." Sarah described her day, from meeting Marcus to learning how to use the hospital's computer systems to observing a physical therapy session with a teenage girl who was relearning to walk after a car accident. "What struck me most," Sarah continued, "was how much of nursing is about being fully present with people during really important moments in their lives. It's not just about medical skills. It's about seeing each person as a whole human being with fears and hopes and families who love them." "That's a very mature observation," Mrs. Chin said. "It sounds like this experience is confirming that nursing is the right path for you." "Definitely. But, Mrs. Chun, can I tell you something I've been thinking about?" "Of course. This opportunity you and Mr. Kingston have given me, it's not just changing my life. Every patient I help, every family I support, that's going to be possible because you believed in me. It's like the impact multiplies." Mrs. Chun was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was emotional. "Sarah, that understanding, that sense of responsibility and opportunity is exactly why we created this program. You're not just succeeding academically, you're growing into the kind of person who will make the world better." The following week brought a new challenge when Tommy came home from school visibly upset. Sarah had been studying for her pharmacology exam when he walked in, threw his backpack on the floor, and slumped onto the couch without his usual cheerful greeting. "What's wrong?" Sarah asked, immediately setting aside her textbooks. Tommy was quiet for a long moment before answering. "Some kids at school found out about the foundation scholarship. They're saying we're charity cases, that we don't deserve to live in this neighborhood." Sarah felt a flash of anger, followed quickly by hurt on Tommy's behalf. She had worried this might happen eventually. Their dramatic change in circumstances wasn't easily hidden, and teenagers could be cruel. "What exactly did they say?" she asked, sitting down next to him. "Jake Morrison, his dad works in real estate. He was telling everyone that we used to live in the projects, and now we're only here because some rich people feel sorry for us. He said we're taking opportunities away from people who actually earn them." Sarah took a deep breath, trying to control her emotions before responding. "Tommy, what do you think about what Jake said?" Tommy looked up at her with eyes that seemed older than his 15 years. "I think Jake Morrison doesn't know what it's like to worry about whether there's going to be food for dinner or whether you'll have a place to sleep next month. I think he doesn't understand what you sacrificed to take care of me, or how hard you're working in school now." Sarah felt a surge of pride in her younger brother's maturity and insight. "But, Sarah," Tommy continued, "part of me wonders if he has a point. Are we taking something that should go to someone else?" This was the question Sarah had wrestled with herself, especially in the early weeks of the program. She had wondered whether there was someone more deserving, someone smarter or more talented who should have received this opportunity instead. "Tommy, can I tell you what I've learned about this?" she asked. "The foundation doesn't just give money to people randomly. They look for specific qualities, character, determination, potential for positive impact. They chose us not because they felt sorry for us, but because they saw something in us worth investing in." She paused, thinking about her conversation with Robert Kingston months earlier. Also, the foundation isn't taking opportunities away from other people. They're creating new ones. The money they're spending on our education and living expenses isn't money that would otherwise go to Jake Morrison or his family. I know that logically, Tommy said. But it's still hard when people make you feel like you don't belong somewhere. I understand that feeling completely, Sarah said. But, Tommy, you belong everywhere you choose to work hard and contribute positively. Your worth isn't determined by where you started. It's determined by what you do with the opportunities you're given. They talked for another hour, with Sarah sharing some of her own struggles with feeling out of place in college and how she had learned to focus on her goals rather than other people's opinions. Besides, Sarah added with a slight smile, in a few years when I'm an RN helping save lives and you're graduating at the top of your class, Jake Morrison can explain to people how we didn't deserve our success. The next day, Sarah had an idea. She called Marcus Thompson and asked if the foundation had any volunteer opportunities where she and Tommy could help other families in situations similar to their past circumstances. Actually, yes, Marcus said enthusiastically. We have a tutoring program at the community center in your old neighborhood. We're always looking for volunteers, especially ones who can relate to the challenges these kids are facing. That Saturday, Sarah and Tommy took the bus back to their former neighborhood to volunteer at the Hamilton Community Center. The building was old but well-maintained, with a large room set up with tables and chairs where children of various ages were working on homework with volunteer tutors. Sarah was assigned to help a 12-year-old girl named Destiny with her math homework. Destiny was bright but struggling with confidence, often saying she was just not good at math before attempting problems. Can I tell you a secret? Sarah said after watching Destiny solve several problems correctly while insisting she didn't understand them. I used to say the exact same thing about math. Really? Destiny asked skeptically. Really? I thought I was terrible at it because it didn't come easily to me. But then I realized that the students who were naturally good at math had just practiced more or had more help at home. Once I started working harder and asking for help when I needed it, I got much better. Sarah helped Destiny work through several algebra problems, praising her logical thinking and problem-solving approach rather than just her correct answers. By the end of their session, Destiny was attempting problems without her usual self-deprecating comments. Meanwhile, Tommy was working with a group of high school students on essay writing. Sarah watched him patiently explain how to structure an argument and provide evidence, drawing on his own recent improvements in school. On the bus ride home, both Sarah and Tommy were energized by the experience. Did you see how smart those kids are? Tommy asked excitedly. They just need someone to believe in them and give them some extra support. That's exactly right, Sarah agreed. And, Tommy, did you notice how good you were at explaining things? You might have a future in teaching. Tommy grinned. Maybe. But first I'm thinking about engineering. There's a summer program for high school students at the university, and I want to apply. That evening, Sarah updated Mrs. Chun about both the challenges Tommy had faced at school and their volunteer experience at the community center. I'm sorry Tommy had to deal with those comments from his classmates, Mrs. Chun said. Unfortunately, that kind of reaction isn't uncommon when people's circumstances change dramatically. But it sounds like you both handled it with remarkable maturity. It actually motivated us to get more involved in helping other people, Sarah explained. I think sometimes when you receive help, the best way to deal with any guilt or self-doubt is to find ways to help others. That's exactly the attitude we hope to see from program participants, Mrs. Chun said warmly. Sarah, I want to share some news with you. Robert and I have been discussing the possibility of expanding the Foundation's programs, and we'd like your input as someone who has experienced the program firsthand. What kind of input? Sarah asked, intrigued. We're considering creating a peer mentorship component, where current participants would be paired with new ones to provide support and guidance. We think you might be an excellent candidate to help design and eventually lead such a program. Sarah felt a familiar mixture of excitement and intimidation. I'd be honored to be involved. But, Mrs. Chun, I'm still figuring things out myself. Sarah, the fact that you're still learning and growing is exactly what would make you a good mentor. You remember what it feels like to be uncertain and overwhelmed. You can share not just your successes, but your struggles and how you've worked through them. After the call, Sarah sat in her bedroom thinking about the conversation. A year ago, she had been using her last $10 to buy dinner, worried about basic survival. Now she was not only succeeding in nursing school, but being asked to help design programs to support other people. She thought about Marcus in the pediatric ward, about Destiny struggling 2 years later. Sarah Martinez stood at the podium in the university auditorium, wearing her pristine white nursing uniform and the cap that marked her completion of the RN program. The auditorium was filled with graduating nurses and their families, but Sarah's eyes found the small group sitting in the third row. Tommy, now a confident 17-year-old who had been accepted to 3 engineering programs, Mrs. Chun and Robert Kingston, both beaming with pride, and Jess, who had graduated alongside Sarah and already had a job lined up in the emergency department. But the person Sarah was most excited to see was sitting in the front row, a young woman named Carmen Rodriguez, who had become Sarah's first official mentee through the Foundation's expanded peer support program. Carmen had started the nursing program 6 months earlier, and Sarah had been guiding her through the same challenges and fears she had once faced herself. Today marks not just the end of our education, but the beginning of our service, Sarah said into the microphone, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside her. As the student speaker selected by her graduating class, she had spent weeks crafting words that would capture what this moment meant. 2.5 years ago, I was working as a waitress, convinced that college was something other people did, something I couldn't afford and didn't deserve. I thought my life was about survival, about just getting through each day. She paused, looking out at the audience, and remembering that scared 19-year-old who had sat in Murphy's diner counting her last $10. But today I understand that survival was never the goal, growth was. Every challenge I faced, every moment of doubt, every small victory was preparing me for this moment and for the career ahead of me. After the ceremony, Sarah found herself surrounded by family and friends offering congratulations. But the conversation she was most eager to have was with Carmen, who approached her with tears in her eyes. "I can't believe you did that," Carmen said, referring to Sarah's decision to mention her mentorship program in the graduation speech. "You gave me credit for helping you remember why you wanted to be a nurse." Sarah hugged her mentee. "Carmen, watching you work with pediatric patients, seeing your natural compassion and dedication, it reminded me that teaching and mentoring are just other forms of nursing. We take care of each other." "I have something to tell you," Carmen said excitedly. "I got the scholarship." Sarah's eyes widened. Carmen had applied for a specialized scholarship to pursue pediatric nursing, the same field that had captured Sarah's heart during her clinical rotations. "Carmen, that's incredible. You earned that completely on your own." "Maybe," Carmen said with a smile, "but I never would have had the confidence to apply if you hadn't pushed me." Later that evening, the Kingston Foundation hosted a small celebration dinner for the newest graduates from their program. Sarah was one of 12 students completing their education this year, and the diversity of their achievements was remarkable. Future teachers, engineers, social workers, and healthcare professionals who would go on to serve their communities. Robert Kingston stood to address the group, his expression proud, but also slightly emotional. 3 years ago, Margaret and I had an idea about investing in people whose potential wasn't being recognized by traditional systems. We believed that character and determination were more important predictors of success than standardized test scores or family connections. He looked around the table at the young adults who had proven that theory correct. What we didn't anticipate was how much he would teach us. "Sarah, your peer mentorship program has become a model that we're implementing in other cities. Marcus, your research on sustainable engineering has attracted attention from environmental groups nationwide." Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest as Robert continued highlighting each graduate's achievements and contributions. "But most importantly," he continued, "each of you has demonstrated that success isn't just about personal achievement. It's about lifting others as you rise." After dinner, Sarah walked outside to get some air and found Mrs. Chun sitting on a bench in the restaurant's garden area. "Mind if I join you?" Sarah asked. "I was hoping you would," Mrs. Chun replied, patting the space beside her. "I wanted to talk to you privately about something." Sarah sat down, curious about what seemed like a serious conversation. "Sarah, Robert, and I have been discussing the future of the foundation, and we'd like to offer you a position. Sarah's heart skipped. What kind of position? Program Director for the Peer Mentorship Initiative. You would be responsible for expanding the program nationally, training other mentors, and helping us develop new support systems for participants. Sarah stared at Mrs. Chun, processing this unexpected opportunity. But I just graduated. I'm supposed to start work as a pediatric nurse next month. And you still can part-time. This position would allow you to split your time between clinical nursing and foundation work. We believe your experience as both a program participant and a working nurse would bring a unique perspective to the role. Mrs. Chun turned to face Sarah fully. I won't lie to you, it would be challenging. You'd be traveling, speaking to groups, making decisions that affect other people's lives. But, Sarah, you've already been doing this work informally. We're just asking if you'd like to do it officially. Sarah thought about Carmen, about the teenagers she and Tommy tutored at the community center, about the conversations she'd had with other program participants who were struggling with imposter syndrome or family pressure. Can I ask you something, Mrs. Chun? That first night when you came into the diner, were you already planning to offer me this opportunity? Mrs. Chun smiled. Honestly, no. I was drawn to your kindness, your work ethic, your obvious care for your brother. But I had no idea you would become someone who could lead and inspire others the way you have. What changed? You did. You grew from someone who was focused solely on survival into someone who sees the bigger picture, who understands that individual success is meaningless without community impact. Sarah looked up at the stars, barely visible above the city lights. Mrs. Chun, I need to ask Tommy what he thinks. This would affect him too. Of course. Take all the time you need to decide. The next morning, Sarah sat with Tommy in their kitchen, a kitchen in a house they had been able to buy with Sarah's nursing salary and the foundation's continued support, explaining the job offer. That sounds amazing, Tommy said immediately. Sarah, you're already doing that work anyway. Why not get paid for it? And be able to help even more people? It would mean I'd be traveling sometimes, that I wouldn't be around as much. Tommy rolled his eyes. Sarah, I'm 17. I can take care of myself. Besides, I'll be leaving for college in a year anyway. He paused, becoming more serious. Can I tell you something? Watching you succeed, seeing how you've turned what happened to us into something that helps other people, it's made me proud to be your brother in a way that has nothing to do with what you've done for me. Sarah felt tears pricking her eyes. What do you mean? I mean, you could have just taken the foundation's help, become a nurse, and lived a good life. Nobody would have blamed you for just focusing on yourself. But, instead, you decided that your job is to make sure other people get the same chances you got. That afternoon, Sarah called Mrs. Chun to accept the position. Within a week, she was dividing her time between the pediatric ward at City General and the foundation offices, designing training materials for new mentors, and developing assessment tools to identify students who would benefit most from peer support. Her first official assignment was to travel to Chicago, where the foundation was launching its program at 3 new colleges. Sarah found herself standing in front of a room full of current college students who had volunteered to become mentors, all of them looking at her expectantly. How many of you have ever felt like you didn't belong somewhere? Sarah asked the group of 25 students. Nearly every hand went up. Good, Sarah said with a smile. That means you remember what it feels like to need support, and you understand how much difference it can make when someone believes in you. She spent the next 2 days training these volunteers, sharing techniques for building trust, recognizing signs of burnout, and helping men set realistic goals. But more than the practical skills, Sarah found herself teaching these future mentors something she had learned from her own experience, that helping others succeed was not a burden or obligation, but a privilege. 6 months later, Sarah received a phone call that brought her story full circle in an unexpected way. Marcus Thompson was calling with news about Murphy's Diner. Sarah, I thought you'd want to know. Frank is retiring and looking to sell the diner. He called the foundation because he heard about your success and wondered if there might be interest in helping one of his current employees buy the business. Sarah's heart raced. Which employee? A woman named Rosa who's been working there for 8 years. Single mother, 2 kids, always talked about wanting to run her own place, but never had access to capital. Sarah didn't hesitate. Marcus, Can you arrange a meeting? I'd like to talk to Rosa myself. 2 days later, Sarah walked into Murphy's diner for the first time in over 2 years. The place looked exactly the same: fluorescent lights, checkered floor, the persistent smell of coffee, and fried food. But instead of feeling trapped or overwhelmed by memories of struggle, Sarah felt a deep sense of gratitude. Rosa was indeed someone Sarah remembered, a hardworking woman who had always been kind to customers despite dealing with her own challenges. When Sarah explained the foundation's small business development program and her personal interest in helping Rosa achieve her dream of restaurant ownership, Rosa began to cry. "I can't believe this is real," Rosa said. "I've been saving money for years, but I never had enough for a down payment, and no bank would give me a loan." "Rosa," Sarah said gently, "I want you to understand something. This isn't charity. The foundation invests in people who demonstrate character, work ethic, and potential for success. You've proven all of those qualities." 3 months later, Sarah stood in the newly renovated Rosa's family diner, watching the grand reopening celebration. Rosa had kept most of Frank's menu but added several dishes from her family's Mexican heritage. The place was packed with neighborhood families, former customers, and new ones drawn by word of mouth about Rosa's excellent food and warm service. "Sarah," Rosa said during a quiet moment, "I need to tell you something. There's a young man who comes in here late at night, always orders just coffee, always looks worried. He reminds me of how you described yourself when you were working here." Sarah smiled. "What's his name?" "David. He's 22, works at the warehouse down the street, has a baby daughter he's raising alone. Would you like me to talk to him?" "I was hoping you'd say that." That night, Sarah sat in the same corner booth where she had once shared dinner with Mrs. Chun. When David came in for his usual late shift coffee, Rosa quietly introduced them. "Hi, David," Sarah said. "Mind if I buy you something to eat? I'd like to hear your story." As David hesitantly shared his struggles with balancing work and fatherhood while dreaming of going to school to become an electrician, Sarah saw herself 3 years earlier. The details were different, but the core challenge was the same: a young person with potential and determination held back by circumstances beyond their control. "David," Sarah said when he finished talking, "I'd like you to meet someone. Are you free tomorrow afternoon?" 6 months later, David was enrolled in a technical college program with full foundation support. His daughter was in an excellent daycare program aimed with math confidence, about her own journey from desperation to hope. Each experience had taught her something about resilience, about the power of believing in people, about the responsibility that came with being given opportunities. Sarah pulled out a notebook and began writing down ideas for the peer mentorship program. She thought about all the things she wished she had known when she started college, all the fears and insecurities that could have been addressed with guidance from someone who had walked a similar path. As she wrote, she realized that her story was no longer just about receiving help. It was about learning how to give it. The scared, exhausted waitress who had spent her last money on dumplings was evolving into someone who could provide hope and support to others facing similar challenges. The transformation wasn't complete yet, but Sarah could see the direction it was heading. She was becoming exactly the kind of person that Robert Kingston and Mrs. Chun had believed she could be. Someone whose success would create opportunities for others to succeed as well. Realized that her discomfort with accepting help wasn't humility, it was fear. Fear that if she let herself believe in this new life, it might be taken away. But as she looked around their comfortable apartment and thought about Tommy's laughter from the next room, she decided to try something radical. She would allow herself to be happy. She would work hard and be grateful, but she wouldn't apologize for accepting an opportunity to build a better life. The next morning, Sarah put on her favorite shirt and headed to campus with a new sense of purpose. She was no longer just surviving or even just studying. She was building the foundation for the life she and Tommy deserved. In her anatomy class, Professor Johnson announced that they would be starting their unit on the cardiovascular system. As Sarah took out her notebook and prepared to learn about the heart, she thought about how fitting it was. Her own heart, which had been closed off by years of struggle and disappointment, was finally learning to open again. "I worked 18-hour days fixing it up, finding good tenants, and managing every detail myself. Within 2 years, I had paid Frank back with interest and used the profits to buy another building. Frank's investment in me eventually led to my entire real estate portfolio. Mrs. Chen leaned forward. But the most important thing Frank gave me wasn't money. It was confidence. He saw something in me that I didn't see in myself yet. That's what we want to give you, Sarah. The chance to discover what you're truly capable of. That night, after her shift ended, Sarah made her decision. She called Marcus Thompson's number and left a voicemail saying she wanted to accept the opportunity. The next morning, Marcus called her back. Mrs. Kingston will be delighted, he said. Can you come in tomorrow to finalize everything? Yes, Sarah said, surprised by how confident her voice sounded. I'll be there. As she hung up the phone, Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and terror. She was about to embark on a journey she had never thought possible, but she was also leaving behind the familiar struggle that had defined her life for so long. Tommy had already left for school, but he had left a note on the refrigerator. I'm proud of you, Sarah. Mom would be too. For the first time in years, Sarah allowed herself to dream about the future, about graduation day, about helping patients as a registered nurse, about being able to provide a real home for Tommy. The dreams felt dangerous and wonderful at the same time. She looked around their small apartment one more time, then began planning for the biggest change of her life. The city. Sarah had never been this high up in a building before, and the view was breathtaking. Please have a seat, Marcus said. Mrs. Chen will join us in a few minutes. Mrs. Chen works here? Sarah asked, confused. Marcus smiled. You could say that. Before Sarah could ask what he meant, the door opened, and Mrs. Chen walked in. But this wasn't the tired, elderly woman from the diner. This Mrs. Chen wore an elegant business suit. Her hair was perfectly styled, and she moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to being in charge. Hello, Sarah, she said warmly, sitting across from her at the conference table. I suppose I owe you an explanation.